to them. So that's the way we are creatively trying to innovate in ways to make sure everybody gets drinking water every day. That's so basic.
Yeah, so one of the things I've appreciated, even just in meeting you just this couple seconds, minutes, is the transparency that you all, that your office is providing. One thing that I obviously I talk to a lot of people, and I have a lot of different kinds of sources. And one thing you mentioned earlier is that FEMA doesn't know, like they're dependent on the local government here to advise them what needs to be done. And so one of the things yesterday that I dealt with was the leptospirosis cases, or the supposed cases.
Yes.
And I have some sources in the CDC, and one of the things that they were asking me about, and that was kind of making them nervous, was that they were kind of sitting around and waiting for somebody to say, "Hey, let's go do this. Let's go out here," and they're just now, they're just now getting out to these towns. So what do you think the process is there that's slowing down the CDC and those sort of like those organizations that need your involvement?
This is a no-brainer. If you got flood, you got risk, and when you have an emergency, you have to assess your risk and address them and try to minimize the effects that they can have. And in this type of crisis, it's exponential growth. So the containment is very important, and it starts with education. And certainly, one of the first meetings we had was not only to bring drinking water to people, but also to make sure people wouldn't get sick by drinking. They're going to look for water anywhere, and we want to make sure that if we do education, we don't have a health issue. And regarding, for example, the leptospirosis, which is whenever you have contact in a body of water where you have an animal, usually rodents, or it might be a pet. We got pets that if it's a dog and it's not vaccinated, it can be your home pet, the one that could put you at risk. So in shelters, we're vaccinating pets that are in shelters that we don't have a certification, or might not be properly vaccinated. And certainly there are still water flooded areas and communities where I've seen kids running around, playing in the water, elderly moving from one place to another. If you are an elderly and Puerto Rico has the highest incidence of diabetes, you have an ulcer in your foot, you're in real danger. So we started. We're working together with the CDC and the state epidemiologists, and we're meeting every day. We met Monday every day. We're getting our statistics, and all the hospitals, they have a resident nurse that deals with nurse epidemiologists, and we are the protocol is now any suspicious case is treated as leptospirosis. That's if you have symptoms of fever, we'll go with the process regarding antibiotics, and we are treating all of them in the same way. I can tell you, in the meeting we have the coroner's office, the local coroner's office, regarding deaths that are through the process of autopsy. We also have our state epidemiologists there, and we are tracking all the census, and right now it's controlled, and but there are risks, and what we are doing now is education. We are delivering leaflets, since we don't have internet, since we don't have TV. We are going back to the bullhorn around town, telling people an orientation, telling them to don't go up and get into water bodies, flooded water bodies, about the risk, about hygiene, about boiling water. So it's loose leaves and a bullhorn like back in the 50s.
Yeah, so it really does feel like the 50s out
yes,
here
sir.
with everything going on.
My girls, they cannot, I always see them, I'm driving around, they're always in there. And with our internet, we're going back to checkers.
And you get to you get to look around and see what's going on right now.
It's amazing. This is a different place. The day after. The day after was like no energy, no water, no TV, no internet, no telephone, no wireless. The first cabinet meeting, we were counting heads, who's missing. So that happens to everyone, and that creates anxiety. And I believe our duty is to educate. So there's no anxiety and panic regarding people about the possibility of a plague or anything like that. But it's the state's duty to do education, to provide the means so people, can have the tools so that they can avoid this risk. So certainly, it's all the risk elements are there, and we need to contain them and make people aware of how to handle those risks.
The last thing I want to ask you about, and it's something we have to go, the last thing I'd like to ask you about is there's a lot of talk these days around numbers with, both, official cases of leptospirosis but also official deaths. And there's this idea that we're dealing in officialness, a lot of official numbers, but in the real world we have, realistic sorts of, we're dealing with this many cases and we suspect this many people have, passed away as a result of it. I'm curious, what the state's mindset is on that, why we're sticking to, I know you have to have official numbers, but people are also wondering, what real numbers are out there that, because the death tolls and official and death tolls and that sort of thing identify the problem.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering what your response is to that.
Well, I got to deal with a glossary of words, right? And when I talk to the epidemiologists of the state, it's no, it's not a confirmed case, a suspicious case, or you need a second test to confirm, and it gets technical. But we say here, you got to put it in rice and beans, and that's so everybody understands it. And there's a real risk and there's a real danger, and it doesn't matter if you need 2 weeks to get it, which is what happens, to get the results. We need to assume, and we recognize that the risk is there, and we want to minimize human life being at risk. So I hear what the official numbers are, and that there are none confirmed as of today by the CDC or by the epidemiology of the state, but nobody's going to convince me that there's not a problem and a high risk. So we are acting that if you get with the fever to the hospital, we are assuming that you have been exposed to leptospirosis, because you can take prophylactic measures, give you commonly found antibiotics, and then just in case, we save that life. But people need to understand that. And if your little kid shows fever or symptoms, I don't want the coroner to find out if he had or didn't have. So I want to prevent and detection. It's very liberal and ample. I'm not taking any risk.
Do you see how, for the average citizen, when it feels like we're dealing in official numbers, but I like your phrase rice and beans, and there's that disconnect, how maybe it might feel like a disconnect between the government or some sort of conspiracy between the government and numbers?
It usually happens, Sometimes I hear government politicians, what did he say? It's they're trying to avoid pitfalls and risk again. I think to people you got to be candid and tell them the truth, and that's the best. And obviously on a responsible way. And everybody has their role in government, and my role, since I'm not the epidemiologist of the state, I'm not the expert on the material, but I hear them and I try to tell people what I would tell my children or what I would tell you as my friend, and it's be careful, avoid risk, and this could This is a deadly issue, and I want everybody safe, and let's try to avoid any complications and any risk. So this is the way to handle it, and people are very conscious, and I trust them that they'll take the correct measures. We need to talk clear, so they are not confused.
All right. I really appreciate your time, sir.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. All right.